All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Monday, April 3rd. F it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat and Clayton. We are here in the year 2023. So good to see you and good to continue this long running show that we've been doing for a very long time, as listeners now know.
Yes, absolutely. So just to give an update, I am not still sick. I am hoarse
Okay.
from screaming for Cody Rhodes last night.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we all know how that worked out.
Yep. Well, Clayton, it was a wild weekend watching WrestleMania, but it doesn't seem like the two-night WrestleMania negatively affected the box office because I mean, listen, I think there's going to be a lot of crossover between fans of WWE and fans of D&D, and those fans managed to find time to do both this weekend. It's
Hmm.
pretty clear that the bloodline did not keep people from going to see the new Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves movie. So Clayton, would you like to give a special WrestleMania weekend plow for
Yes.
this week at the box office?
Well, Roman Reigns may have retained, but John Wick Chapter 4 didn't because the number one movie in America is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which made $38.5 million in its debut weekend. Number two, John Wick Chapter 4 made $28.2 million, down 62%. It's at $122.8 million in its second weekend. Number three, his only son from Angel Studios made $5.5 million in its first weekend. Number four, Scream 6 made $5.3 million, down only 36%. It lost 339 theaters. It's at $98.2 million in its fourth weekend. It's gonna make 100, Pat. Number five, Creed. Oh, yeah. Number five, Creed 3 made $5 million, down 39%. It is losing 380 theaters, and it is at $148.5 million in its fifth frame. That is your top five.
All right, so Clayton, we're gonna get into our new champion Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, but a couple of quick things I want to hit here. First of all, John Wick Chapter 4
Hmm.
was outstanding again at number two. Had a higher drop than we thought, but still 62% in line what a big number one movie typically drops in its second weekend. But on this show last week, Clayton, you and I were talking about how after this incredible performance, there's got to be a top five. There's got to be a chapter five. They got to do a sequel. It's a slam doink. And then word broke this week. No sequel has been announced. No chapter five has been announced. But the director, Chad Stahelski, who has directed all of the John Wick movies. He did say in an interview with the Hollywood Reporter that they're open to it, and he knows if the right idea comes along, the team, which I assume means Keanu Reeves, would be open to it. And my guess is the right idea will be let's have John Wick do another movie. That's the idea. This movie is a giant smash at the box office. The idea will be, hey, what if John Wick was in a movie again?
Yeah,
That's
you
my
know
guess.
what's a great idea is a Brinks truck full of money. That's a great
Hmm.
idea.
Great idea.
That's the
Great idea.
idea that they're waiting for.
Yes, yes. So the idea, exactly. The idea that they are hoping to hear very soon that will light them up creatively is this studio saying, how's about more? How's
Yeah.
about double?
Mhm.
So, that sounds like a good idea. Listen, this movie is a smash. It's the rare thing where they have created a new gigantic IP within the last couple of years. And you got to sequelize that. Now they are doing spin-offs. There's the ballerina movie. Apparently there's a Continental movie. Chapter 4 definitely set up other characters to spin off, but the big money is in Keanu's back, Chapter 5. And I think that, listen, this movie is at $122 million after 2 weeks.
Yep.
That is massive. This is an IP that you gotta milk dry, and then when it's dry, you milk a little dust out of it afterwards.
So, can I just applaud Scream 6 here a little bit since you're
Go
talking
for it.
about John Wick? So, this movie was poised this weekend to actually beat His Only Son, but His Only Son sort of nosed forward, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. But I mean, only 36% drop in a fourth weekend. And this is like a horror film. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it's a film that has spoilers that have already been spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
And people are still going to see this movie. I mean, this is a movie that's going to make over $100 million. And I mean, the Paramount's just killing it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. This is Clayton, this is a movie, Scream 6, that is poised to become the highest grossing Scream movie ever. Not the
Mhm.
highest grossing sequel. This movie is going to outgross the original movie probably in the next week, because the original Scream has made $103 million at the domestic box office. Only two of the Scream movies have gotten over 100. This movie's at 98 million. In the next week, Scream 6 will be the highest grossing Scream movie of all time in a 27-year franchise.
And it's a number 6.
Yeah, that's what's amazing about this. This is
And
this is stunning. The performance of this movie is incredible, and the health of the Scream franchise is just something that uh we should all acknowledge Scream.
mhm.
Everyone acknowledge Scream right now.
Acknowledge it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, then before we get to Dungeons& and Dragons, we gotta look
Mhm.
at number 6, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This is a movie that made 4.7 million, down 49%. It's hemorrhaging theaters,
Yep.
and it's at $53.5 million in its third weekend. Now, this is a family film, as we've
Mhm.
been bludgeoned into believing by Zachary Levi, and this thing got its lunch eaten by Dungeons& and Dragons, right? And now Mario coming out this Wednesday is gonna completely decimate this film.
Yes, yes. This movie, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, has now, after 3 weekends, finally made as much money as the original Shazam made in its opening weekend. That
Wow.
is how bad the performance of Fury of the Gods is, and how thoroughly rejected this movie is, and how much in the decline superhero movies, or at least non A-list superhero characters, how much they are in decline right now. That has taken 3 weeks for Shazam 2 to make in total as much as Shazam 1 made in its first 3 days.
It's so funny because let's talk about Dungeons& and Dragons: Honor
Let's
Among
do it.
Thieves, and
It's time.
the thing that I've been hearing is, wow, it's so great to have a movie that's not a superhero movie.
Mhm.
Like, there's a lot of buzz like that
Yes.
about this film, where it's, wow, a special effects film that is not a superhero film. So, there is fatigue, and I think, like we've said before, people are still gonna see superhero movies, huh? It's not gonna crater, overnight, but man, DC is dropping the Blue Beetle trailer today, and I
Mhm.
am just very excited to see what they're gonna try to make this movie into, because that thing we know is gonna be a total disaster.
Yes.
But
Yes.
a movie that's not a total disaster, Dungeons& and Dragons, opened to 38.5. Now, it was looking like 40 all weekend, and then
Mhm.
it had a soft Saturday,
Mhm.
and this is a good opening for this movie in the sense that it was on the higher end of its tracking.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a blowaway like, wow, this was something so beyond what we could have hoped, but 38.5 is for sure on the high end. This
Mm,
is a movie where the low end of the tracking had it possibly in the high 20s,
mhm.
and this is a remake of a movie that bombed 20 years ago. The original
I
Dungeons and
I wouldn't say
Dragons.
it's a remake of a movie. I
Oh,
think
no,
it's
not a
a
remake, but, it's a
yeah,
they're rebooting a
the
IP where the
IP.
first movie, the only movie, was a bomb. So
Mhm.
there is always the possibility that this IP had some theatrical stink on it, and I think we're gonna see next week another IP that had l longtime theatrical stink on it is going to completely wipe that stink off forever and ever, and everyone knows what movie I'm talking about there. But Dungeons and Dragons was an IP where this movie easily could have been a disaster, easily could have bombed, open to in the teens if it had been bad. So this opening to 38.5, what it does to me is it wipes the stink off of this IP and
Mhm.
turns Dungeons and Dragons into a viable theatrical franchise, which, as we'll talk about I think we're going to read an email that we got this weekend from a wannabe oh boy, and that's very important. I think this opening weekend is very important because it makes D&D a viable theatrical franchise.
Yeah.
That's what this 38.5 does.
So here is an interesting thing about D&D, this
Mhm.
movie in particular. So, according to Anthony D'Alessandro, D is for D&D
D is for D&D.
at
Mhm.
Deadline.
Mhm.
The difference in box office can be contributed to format and ticket pricing. Now, they're talking about this as a comp for Dune, right, which opened to 41.
Okay.
Not including early access activity, 74% of consumers have elected to see D&D in standard auditoriums as opposed to premium experience, right?
Wow.
Which Dune had at 58%. So 58% of people went and saw,
Mhm.
Dune in a premium. Gross wise, 22% of D&D's box office came from PLFs, 10 came from IMAX screens, and 3 from other premium formats, right? So that is super interesting because we're seeing now that people are going to see more movies
Mhm.
and they are budgeting what they think not deserves to be a PLF, but what they need to see in a PLF or an IMAX and what they don't, right? My
Mhm.
assumption here is that people went and saw John Wick 4 in IMAX, in
Mhm.
Screen X, in 4DX. And then they were like, "You know what? I'm going to see D&D, but I'm going to budget for this. I want to see it, but I'm not going to spend the highest level of money for that." Because they also might be saving a little bit of dough for Mario.
Right.
So that's an interesting wrinkle. I mean, we were saying more premium screens, which I agree with, but that does not mean that we are totally abolishing all regular screens
Right.
because there's
Right.
still going to be a contingent of people who aren't subscribers to A-list or things like that and will want to say, "Hey, I'm going to go see this at a matinee," because
Mm.
this movie did most of its business early in the afternoon, where John Wick was a late night movie.
Yes. Yes. And the D&D crowd is used to experiencing D&D on a cardboard flat surface with little, quarter of an inch figurines.
Mhm.
That is the level of of production value that D&D fans expect out of D&D. So you need to step them up before they get all the way to 40x, all the way to IMAX. So I think the D&D fans wanting to just move up a little bit and see it in regular standard 2D makes sense. You can't jump straight from a cardboard flat surface all the way up to IMAX. It would
So
be too
you think
scary of a jump. They
yes,
need to work their way up there. So
yeah,
I do
IMAX
think that's part of what D&D needs to accustom their fans to is them just being on a giant screen. It's a lot for them.
yes, that would be, dissonance for them
Yeah,
to, see something so big and
right.
so 3D.
Right, right, right. Because fans of this IP are used to experiencing D&D, and I'm guessing when you said how you were a huge D&D player last week, that
Not
most
a huge
D&D
D&D player.
fans like yourself are used to experiencing D&D on a table in a parent's basement. So to
Yeah, in
go
a
from a
parent's
parent's
basement.
basement to an IMAX screen or to rumble seats or to other PLFs, that is a big leap that could be disconcerting, that could really affect your four eyes and such. So I get it how most D&D ticket buyers went with standard definition screens this first weekend.
Yeah, so we've got that, and I think that's actually good, right? Because
Yeah.
that means that we are getting people going at different times, using different screens, and
Mhm.
overall just going to the movies.
Yes, yes, yes. This is a great win for the movies. It's a great win for the owners of this IP. This is a nice win for Chris Pine. We went through his box office history on our weekend preview episode, and he has not fared well other than, Star Trek movies or movies where he is the second or third lead in a film. Whenever he's been the above the title star of a film,
Mhm.
Finest Hour, his Jack Reacher Shadow Recruit movie. Those movies have been bombs. So I think this is a big win for him to finally have. Obviously, the IP itself is the star, but Chris Pine was the big star of this movie, and it opened at the high end of expectations. So this is a big win for him.
And there was some harsh weather in the
Uh huh.
southeast,
Yep.
northeast that kind of impacted all movies. So it impacted John Wick, it impacted this. So there is, as Anthony D'Alessandro says, room for growth here.
Yep.
Now, one thing in this article that gave me pause,
Okay.
because I was psyched about this opening. I thought Paramount did an amazing job promoting this film, taking a like you said, a dead or besmirched IP
Mm-hmm.
and making this into a movie that not beat its tracking, but was at the high end of the tracking. But Anthony invokes the Power Rangers movie
Okay.
from late March 2017, which opened to 40.3,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
then
Mm.
only did 85.3 stateside, and the sequel was never made. So
Mm.
that's one of those things where everybody who wanted to see that film, the Power Ranger diehards, went the first weekend and then it did not have legs. Now,
Right.
I saw that movie because that was movie pass time.
Okay.
And I thought it was fine. I enjoyed it. I was not a Power Rangers fan. I did not have any sort of allegiance to the OG cast or any of that stuff, so it didn't
Mhm.
matter to me that these were all newbies.
Mhm.
Now, Power Rangers has a very hardcore fan base. There's a million different iterations on TV, so there could have been saturation there. It's not special. But that did give me pause with this movie, is that this is a movie, D&D, that opened to less than what Power Rangers did, and it's gonna be going up against Mario.
Mario,
So,
yeah.
it's like very this movie may end up in that same bucket as Power Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit on our weekend preview. But here's my thought on why this is a totally different situation. Is Power Rangers is so clearly on its surface a for fans only property. I mean, you
Mhm.
cannot sell that concept and that look to general mass audiences. They are in cheap looking space suits with helmets, and each suit is a different color, and that is such clearly IP that a regular average person will want nothing to do with. And it's a film that had zero recognizable actors. No, I mean, nothing sniffing a star. And, that's similar to, I think, something else you could look at as a comp are the Crunchyroll films, which, have
Uh-huh.
opening weekends that are big and cater to the fans. But like Power Rangers, those movies cannot spread, I think, to the mainstream, at least right now. That there's just nothing that could get the average non-super fan audience to even give it the time of day. Dungeons and Dragons obviously is a very specific IP and maybe a quote unquote nerdy IP, but the presence of someone like Chris Pine lets the average moviegoer be assured this is a real movie. This is not a
Yeah.
stunt movie. This is going to have an actor that you've seen in real movies is going to be in this. This is not a for the fans only property. So I don't think Dungeons and Dragons has any risk of suffering a Power Rangers or Crunchyroll type fate. Chris Pine
Well,
alone tells people this is a real movie that you won't have to be embarrassed going to next week.
that's very true, but in the defense of Power Rangers, they did up the budget. It did not look like the TV shows. They did not go with the same outfits. They tried to make them look more high tech. They tried to bring them into the 21st century. So
But
I
they
do
didn't
think
cast a real actor in the movie.
yeah, I mean, unless we go back to the IMDb, I'm looking at this photo here of the cast, and I don't see anybody striking me as someone who broke out from that film. So,
Right.
I mean, I agree in that sense. Stars or very recognizable actors is a plus for D&D.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Now, I'm looking for some of our favorite thing to look at, which is
Demos.
demos.
Okay, so I
But I'm
am
trying to
looking at the
find them.
demos
Oh, here I
right
got them.
now. You got the demos. Great.
61% of guys showed up to D&D, with men over 25 the biggest demo at 41%, women over 25 at 27%, guys under 25 at 20%, and women under 25 at 12%.
Mm.
The 18 to 34 sect came out at 63%. Diversity demos, 48% Caucasian, 26% Hispanic and Latino, 8% Asian, and I mean 10% Asian, and 8% Black. So
Not diverse. Let's
not
let's just say
diverse. No, not diverse. And you know
Dungeons and
what? Yeah, it's
it,
just
it
not a
basically
property at
played.
this point.
Go for it.
Well, I'm sorry, it played to the base is what it did. I mean, and the thing is this is a franchise that needs to be discovered by other people because it is very I mean, you see a lot of white people playing D&D. I mean, I'm just saying it boldly. I mean,
Right, right.
not that other people don't play it and that D&D hasn't been diversified in the last decades or so, but it's still a very white dorky thing to do.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, you look at these diversity numbers or these demos, and they basically skew along what the population lines are,
Yeah.
in the United States. There's no one over indexed, I would say. It seems like the black population under indexed here
Yeah.
and the Caucasian population over indexed a little bit. So it didn't spread out anywhere. And listen, Chris Pine is the star is not going to be who you go to spread to more diverse demos. He's a real steer the ship, make sure all the Caucasian D&D players take this movie seriously. That's the reason you pick Chris Pine there, not to open it up to brand new audiences, which is after the disaster that was the 20 years ago movie. The
Mhm.
the play here is to right the ship, I guess.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, and you see here 26% Hispanic. I mean, Michelle Rodriguez definitely brought some people into the
Yep,
theater,
yep,
because
yep.
that's somebody that is in the Fast and Furious movies. She's playing an ass kicker in this movie. So
Mhm.
that opens that door. And I do think this has good word of mouth. And maybe a lot of people saw John Wick this weekend. And, this movie could be something that on a Tuesday, someone's gonna take a flyer on because it opened number 1, which is
Right,
key, and they heard it was good.
right, right. Well, the other big thing is a lot of elementary schools are currently in some kind of spring break right now.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe even the high schools and colleges, but there are a lot of children who are home this week. So
The
obviously
rats are
that is
running free and
the
they need to be
rats.
reined in.
Yes, the rats are all over the city, all over the countryside, city rats, country mice. They are heading somewhere. So you got to open those theater doors and let them stream in. But that is going to be huge for Mario, which of course opens this Wednesday. But
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves has to take advantage of these vermin, these children that are running around and get them to buy tickets for this movie. So,
Mhm.
it should be a big week series of weekdays for this film because unlike Shazam, Fury of the Gods, this actually does seem to be a family film.
Mhm. Yes, an actual family film.
So I think let's move off of D&D. It had a very, very solid, I would say, not great, but very good overperforming opening weekend. Let's move to His Only Son, which, man, we got to stop underestimating Jesus as a box office star because
Mhm.
we both had this movie opening out of the top five, probably opening under $3 million, and His Only Son from Angel Studios opened to $5.5 million as a Fathom event and opened number 3. I mean,
Yes.
this is incredible.
Yeah, so a little bit of demos for this.
Okay.
65% female leaning, 66% over 45, which
Wow.
is the standard for these type of movies. Largest one to see was those over 55,
Mhm.
who repped 46% of the crowd. Now, diversity demos again, Jesus has the same sort of demo breakdown as D&D.
Mhm.
56% Caucasian, 29% Latina, Hispanic, 7% Black, and 8% Asian. Bible Belt did the best business.
Wow, the top theater being in Lititz, Pennsylvania.
Lidditz. Lidditz,
Lititz.
Pennsylvania. Represent.
Not
Yes.
not Lil Tits.
No, not little tits. Huh?
Huh? I mean, it would
Liliths.
be something if a town of Lil Tits was the most popular destination for the Jesus movie. It'd be a real statement for the people of Lil Tits.
Maybe
But
it'd
it's
be sacrilegious is what it would be.
okay. Okay. So yeah, Jesus
Hardworking
continues.
people in Lidditz. I'll tell you what, hardworking people over there.
Okay. Well,
Good people.
you
Good people.
salt of the earth, you would say.
Salt of the earth.
So good for Jesus. This is a huge win for him. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of crossover between the Jesus and D&D audience, and the fact that His Only Son was able to open number 3 in a weekend where Dungeons and Dragons also opened is a
Mhm.
credit to the star power of Jesus, and
Yeah.
you could say he's been oversaturated this year because we've had 2 different Chosen movies have opened up, and now you've got this, but
And Jesus Revolution.
and Jesus Revolution. Oh my God. Is Jesus Revolution? Yes, did finish top 10. So there are 2 Jesus movies in the top 10 this week. You have as many Jesus movies as you do superhero movies in your top 10 right now.
Now, can I blow your mind, Pat? Can I blow your mind?
Of course.
Jesus Revolution, currently, its total gross is only $3 million less than Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
Wow. There
Now
was
I yeah. Now I know it took longer because 'cause
right.
it's been 6 weeks, but listen, Shazam ain't gonna make that much more.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's gonna be tight because Shazam did make 4.7 this weekend, where Jesus Revolution made 1. So it's still at the point where for the next few weeks, Shazam will make more per week than Jesus. So I don't know where Jesus Revolution will be able to catch up. Now, if you combine the Jesuses and you
Mhm.
combine His Only Son with Jesus Revolution, then combined they are able to overtake Shazam Fury of the Gods. You know,
Mhm.
because those gods, the Jesus as a singular god, combining Jesus Revolution and his only son, beat all of the gods that are in Fury of the Gods, Shazam 2.
Mhm.
So it's funky math, but you know, Jesus is a funky guy, so I think it's fair to run those kind of numbers.
Yeah.
And then you've got uh yeah, this is probably going to be the only big weekend of his only son. Though I don't know. Do they keep it as another Fathom event next weekend for Easter weekend? I think they should, and I think they probably will. To me, that makes business sense. Easter weekend should be a pretty solid, at least Friday and Saturday for the
Yeah.
movie.
We need to just get someone in that world to be a correspondent for us. I
Yes,
mean, because we just these movies are impossible to track,
yes,
right?
yes.
Because, Box Office Pro, which they're not infallible, huh?
Huh?
Only one was. They are not able to figure out the patterns of these movies because it's just been recent that these Fathom events have become what they've become. And the people who are going to see these movies aren't posting on Twitter beforehand about the movie,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Right,
They're just going, walking up saying one for his only son, or what is it called? His only son.
right.
And, stoically watching this movie, getting up, going home, going about their business, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so that's the thing, is that they're not hysterically tweeting about the movie like somebody who is defending Shazam or
Right,
denouncing Shazam or saying Ant-Man's special effects are actually okay. Like,
right,
you're
right.
not gonna have people doing that.
Right, 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 right. So yeah, we need a Jesus correspondent. So if you are that wannabe oh boy, wannabe oh girl, wannabe oh person
Person.
who has a specific tie or interest in the world of the Jesus movies, write to us at theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. You may have a chance to accept the greatest calling in life, which is to be a correspondent to the BO Boys. Um,
Yes.
Speaking of correspondence to the BO Boys, last
Ooh.
thing I want to do here is talk about an email that we got from our good friend wannabe oh boy Adam from the Stacks,
Wow, one of
and
the OG wannabe boys.
he's been with us since the beginning. And he wrote to us about how big this D&D IP really is. So this is what he says: Dear BO boys, this message is about Dungeons and Dragons, how undervalued this IP is. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, you generally use a module, which is a specific book that has unique characters and a unique setting, basically a plugin. These modules are very well written, extremely in depth, with unique monsters, villains, locations, excellent drawings, creature design. Each one is like a pre-production handbook for a major studio, film, or high-budget streaming series. Whoever gobbles up the film and streaming rights for Dungeons and Dragons is going to be on the first floor of what will, in my humble opinion, replace Marvel in the late 2020s. There's another tabletop IP, Warhammer, which also has a massive audience. The fact that Paramount is producing this Dungeons and Dragons film is another testament to their expertise in the field of box office. Very good chance that behind the scenes Disney and Warner's are duking it out for exclusive rights to both D&D and Warhammer. And then PS, I believe Hasbro owns both D&D and Magic the Gathering and is connecting the two worlds and all of their creatures therein. So that is
Mm.
huge insight from Adam from the Stacks. And here's something to keep in mind. Paramount is releasing this Dungeons and Dragons film.
Mhm.
Paramount also used to be the studio that was releasing the MCU films. Iron Man 1 and
Yes.
those first few years of MCU films were not released through Disney. They were released through Paramount. And
Mhm.
then Marvel sold all of their IP to Disney. Disney owned Marvel, and then Disney became the studio that would produce and release MCU films. But Paramount had the chance back in the, early 2010s to buy Marvel and still be the studio that puts out Marvel films. And as Adam from the Stack said, D&D might be the next Marvel, and Disney's going to be sniffing their snout around this D&D property and this huge universe of characters there. Paramount has a second chance.
Yeah.
They could buy D&D, become the exclusive studio that's going to release these movies, or they could once again lose to Disney. So this is
Well,
put up or shut up time.
and guess who's back in power over Disney?
Bob
Bobby
Iger.
Iger.
Yep.
He loves buying stuff.
Yep. Yep. So
He's the most American of all heads of studios, where it's like, well, let's not make anything. Let's just buy everything.
yep. Yep.
Let's
So
not
this is going to
create. Let's just consume.
It's going to be a huge story to cover. And listen, Paramount has had its victories against Disney. I mean, obviously, Bob Iger had his chance to buy Sonic the Hedgehog years
Yep.
ago, and that didn't happen. And now Paramount's got the incredibly successful Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. But if Adam from the Stacks is correct, and I have no reason to think he's not,
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons is a much, much bigger battleground than Sonic was, and maybe as big a battleground as Marvel was.
I
You know,
mean, that's
well,
the thing is we might see tabletop games and video game adaptations
mhm.
become the not necessarily as dominant as superhero movies were, but they're going to be maybe the prevailing blockbusters in the next coming decade.
I mean, it makes total sense, because comic books were a thing that were read by people who I think are currently 40 and up. I think if
Mm.
you are below 40 years old right now, you did not really grow up on comic books. You grew up on video games and these fantastical, Settlers of Catan, Dungeons and Dragons type tabletop games.
You know what you grew up on? Manga. And manga, it translates to anime, which translates to Crunchyroll, and that's why those movies are doing what they're doing.
I would say that's a 20 and under set. I think people who are currently 20 to 40, it's video games above all else, and then these tabletop games. And the people who are 20 to 40 now are going to be the ones driving the box office and running studios in the next 20 years.
Mhm.
So I think and then manga, I think, is 10, 15 years away from being in that range. But I think Adam from the Stacks may have nailed it that Dungeons and Dragons is about to be the IP. And to me, then, therefore, the center of a bidding war. And listen, we don't root for anything other than box office, but I'm kind of rooting that Paramount pulls this one out. It would be huge
Oh,
for them.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So, Clayton, I think we've done it today.
We
Do you
definitely
think
did
we've
it.
done it?
Of course we did it.
All right. So, like I said, email us at theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. You might be able to be our Jesus correspondent. And hey, Anna from the Stacks, we love having someone who's at the forefront of D&D. He obviously knew his way around it. So if you also are someone who's into D&D like Anna from the Stacks, like Clayton is,
Stop it.
email us at the boboyspodcast at gmail.com. Of course, give us 5-star reviews on all podcast platforms, but especially Apple, because that's the only one that really matters. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. I'm pointing. You can see me pointing. If you are watching us on YouTube, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. Of course, follow us on Twitter at the BO Boys Pod. Wannabe intern Christopher is killing it with the video clips and mixing it up on Twitter. Of course, if you happen to miss it this weekend because you were watching WrestleMania or you were at Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, we dropped a extra special episode this past weekend. It is an episode from April 1st, 1996. So give
Mhm.
that one a listen. And you listen, Adam from the Stacks, he was with us from the beginning. So I'm sure he was listening in real time back then, but you could catch up now on this special episode that we dropped over the weekend.
The
And
tapes were circulating back then.
yes, it was the Jerky Boys and the BO Boys were the two big tapes amongst tape traders back in the mid 90s. Also, quick, just wanted to let people know we're going to be doing an earlier weekend preview episode. Might drop by Wednesday morning because Super Mario Brothers, the movie, is dropping on Wednesday. And right now we are scheduled to have a very special guest on that show. I'll just say it because he would want us to say his name. And that is Danny of I Screen, You Scream 4, number
Number
4,
4.
the movies, that podcast, which we all know and love. Danny is going to be joining us to preview the Super Mario Brothers movie. He is very excited about this movie. We'll see how excited the country is very shortly.
Oh my god. I mean, this is okay. I
It's
don't
going
want
to
to
be huge.
spoil anything. It's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge.
Huge.
All right, Clayton, I think we've done it.
We definitely did it, Pat, and I don't think there's anything left to say except for until next time.
We'll smell you at the box office.
office.
Nailed it.